Simi stood frozen in the doorway. Her breath caught in her throat, as her eyes slowly moved across the walls. The room was covered in photos, dozen pictures of her as a teenager, up until now. Every moment of her life had been captured. Her skin crawled. In the corner of the room sat a small box. Inside it was a black bracelet. Simi's heart dropped. She remembered it. That bracelet belonged to the man who took everything from her when she was just a teenager. She never saw his face. But she remembered that bracelet. Now, she was standing in Maurice's house. Her husband. The man who had treated her with kindness. The man she had given her heart to. But none of it was real. Maurice had been watching her for years. He was the man, from that night. And he had known all along. Simi was 16 the night everything changed. She had just left youth service at church, walking the short path home like she always did, her Bible in one hand, her school bag on her back. She was almost home. Just 5 more minutes. Then from behind, someone grabbed her. She didn't see his face. Everything happened so fast. She tried to fight. Tried to scream. But no words came out. He dragged her behind a wall near a construction site. The night swallowed her cries. Her heart pounded so loudly, it drowned everything else. But there was one thing she couldn't forget. On his wrist was a black leather bracelet. In the center was a small golden plate, with the initials M and L scratched into it. The carving was rough, like someone had done it with a knife. She stared at it the whole time, wishing she could disappear. When it was over, she walked the rest of the way home in silence. Her clothes were dirty. Her hands were trembling. She cleaned up in the dark, too ashamed to cry. Simi didn't tell anyone. Who would believe her? Her parents were respected pastors. They believed in image, in reputation, in holiness. There was no space for a broken story in their perfect home. Weeks later, the symptoms started. Nausea. Fatigue. A missed period. She bought a cheap test and stared at the result for what felt like hours. Her hands shook as she held it. She didn't know if she should scream or cry. Instead, she sat on the floor in silence. When her parents found out, their reaction was worse than she imagined. They didn't ask how it happened. They didn't ask if she was okay. They only asked why she brought shame to their name. The next morning, they packed her things. Her father couldn't even look at her. Her mother cried, but she didn't hug her. They sent her away. Simi was 17, alone, and carrying a child she never asked for. She slept on benches, on floors, on church steps, anywhere she could. She cleaned offices during the day, sold groundnuts at night. She barely ate. But somehow, she survived. And when her son was born, she held him to her chest and cried. She whispered, "You are not a mistake." She named him Eli. Years passed. Simi grew stronger. She worked multiple jobs. She healed, slowly. But she never forgot that night. And she never forgot that bracelet. Simi was just 18 when she met Maurice. She had been living on the streets for months with her baby, Eli. He was only a year old. Life was very hard. She worked during the day at a small food canteen. At night, she cleaned a supermarket. Every morning, she tied Eli to her back with a piece of cloth and moved from one job to another, tired and hungry. One day, Eli's cough got worse. She didn't have enough money, but she took him to a public hospital and waited in line at the emergency room. The nurses said she had to wait for hours. Simi sat on the hard bench, holding her sleeping child close, her eyes heavy with worry. That's when Maurice walked in. He was 22. An only child from a rich family. His father was a businessman. His mother was a retired lawyer. He had come to the hospital to see a doctor, but he noticed Simi sitting alone in the corner with her baby. He walked over slowly and offered her a bottle of water and a snack. At first, Simi didn't trust him. But he smiled gently and said, "You look tired. Let me help." Maurice didn't ask too many questions. He sat next to her until the nurse called her name. Simi didn't know why he stayed. But in that moment, after weeks of struggling alone, his kindness felt nice. Before he left that day, he asked gently, "Do you come here often?" She nodded. "I come every week, for my baby's medicine." Maurice smiled. Then I'll see you next week. And he did. From that day, he returned often. Sometimes he brought food. Other times, baby clothes. He helped her find a small room to rent. He even spoke to someone he knew and got her a better cleaning job at a local office. Simi didn't understand why he cared. But soon, she started trusting him. He was always respectful. Always kind. He would play with Eli and bring small toys. Sometimes, he would just sit with her and talk, about music, about movies, about life. Over time, Simi started to smile again. When she turned 21, Maurice asked her to marry him. Simi was scared. She didn't feel good enough for someone like him. She didn't have a family. Or an education. She had a past no one wanted to hear about. But Maurice wanted her, not out of pity, but love. He promised to take care of her and Eli. And he did. They had a simple wedding. Marriage changed Simi's life in ways she never expected. Maurice made everything easier. He paid her school fees so she could continue her education. He helped her get a small job at his friend's office and supported her without asking for anything in return. She worked as a receptionist. It was her first real job, and she felt proud every day she walked into the building. Her co-workers liked her. Her boss said she was smart and respectful. At home, things were peaceful. Every morning, she dressed Eli for school. He had proper shoes now, clean clothes, and a lunchbox. They ate dinner together every night, Eli talking about school, and Maurice asking how her day went. Simi laughed more now. She no longer worried about food or rent. Maurice treated her with care. He didn't shout. He didn't judge. He bought her small gifts, things she needed but never asked for. A new bag when hers tore. Cream for her hands. A simple necklace. He was kind in ways she didn't know men could be. One night, after Eli had gone to sleep, she sat beside Maurice on the bed. She looked at him and knew she loved him. Not just for what he did, but for who he was. Still, something in her heart felt heavy. She had never told him the truth. She had hidden the story of Eli's birth like it was a secret that could ruin everything. But that night, she decided to tell him. She told him how it happened when she was 17. How she was walking home one evening, and a man followed her. She didn't see his face clearly, but she remembered the fear. He pushed her into a corner and forced himself on her. She couldn't stop him. She told Maurice how she got pregnant after that. How her parents, both church leaders, refused to believe her. They said she brought shame. They threw her out. She said she had no one. That she lived on the streets for a while. Then in small places where people let her stay. She gave birth alone. Raised her child alone. As she told the story, her hands shook. She didn't look at Maurice. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she kept talking. I always thought no one would love me, she said. That I wasn't good enough. That I was dirty. Maurice pulled her gently into a hug and held her close. You're not any of those things, he said softly. You're brave. You're honest. And I'm lucky to have you. Simi cried quietly in his arms. She had carried the truth for so long. Now, someone else carried it with her. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon. Maurice had gone to the office for an emergency meeting, and Eli was spending the weekend at a classmate's house. The house felt too quiet. Simi didn't like sitting around with nothing to do, so she decided to clean. She moved from room to room, humming softly to herself. When she got to Maurice's study, she paused. It wasn't a room she usually touched. Maurice called it his space. But she thought it would be a nice surprise. He always kept it tidy, but there was dust building up. She opened the door gently, stepped inside, and began to clean. She wiped down the polished desk, dusted the high shelves, and rearranged some scattered books. Then behind one of the larger shelves, her fingers brushed against something unusual. It was small and round, like a button. Curious, she pressed it. The bookshelf shifted with a low groan, revealing a narrow doorway. Simi froze. Then slowly, she stepped inside. Her eyes moved across the walls, covered in photos. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Each one was of her. Simi as a teenager, walking home from school. Simi sitting at the market, selling small things. She stepped closer, heart pounding louder with every second. She brushed her fingers over one photo. She remembered that day. It had rained and she had cried. She thought no one saw her. But someone had. Her hands began to shake. On a table in the center of the room sat a small black box. She opened it slowly. Inside was a bracelet. It was the same bracelet the man had worn that night. The one with the unique leather band and golden initials. She stumbled back, her chest tight. It was Maurice. He had been watching her all along. Simi gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. The man she had trusted, loved, cried to, was the same one who had destroyed her life years ago. Her knees gave out and she sank to the floor, gasping for air. She felt sick. Betrayed. Everything she had believed was a lie. Simi waited in the living room. It was getting dark outside. She hadn't eaten all day, but she didn't care. Maurice had called earlier to say he was on his way home. Soon, she heard the front door open. Maurice walked in, carrying his briefcase. Simi stood. "I went into your study today," she said calmly. Maurice stopped walking. He looked confused. "My study?" "Yes," she said. "I cleaned it. I found a button behind the bookshelf. It opened a hidden door." Maurice's eyes changed. He looked nervous. "I saw the room," Simi continued. "I saw all the pictures of me. Pictures from when I was 17. Pictures of me with Eli when he was a baby." Maurice tried to speak. "I can explain." "No. Don't bother," Simi said. Her voice was firm. "You were the man from that night. You followed me. You hurt me. You made me believe you were someone else, and then you married me." Maurice raised his voice. "You don't understand. I was watching over you. I cared about you." "You attacked me," Simi said, her voice rising. "You ruined my life. You left me with a baby, and trauma. Then you came back and pretended to be my savior." Maurice stepped closer. "Stop it. You're talking too much." Simi stood her ground. "The bracelet was in that room. The same one I saw on your wrist that night." Maurice's face turned red. He looked angry. "You think you can talk to me like this? After everything I gave you? You were nothing before me." Then, he raised his hand. But before he could touch her, the front door burst open. "Police. Don't move." Maurice froze. 3 officers rushed inside. One grabbed his arm and pulled him back. The other 2 pinned him to the ground. "What the hell is this?" Maurice shouted. "Get off me." "You are under arrest," one officer said. "You have the right to remain silent." Maurice looked up at Simi, shocked. "You called the police?" Simi didn't move. She just stared at him. Her phone was still recording on the table. One officer picked it up. "She recorded everything," he said. "We heard the threats. This will be used as evidence." Maurice shouted again. "She's lying. This is my wife." But no one listened. Another voice came from the doorway. It was Tola, Simi's friend from work. "She told me everything," Tola said. "I called the police right after she found the room." Maurice looked between them, his face full of anger and disbelief. The officers pulled Maurice up and led him outside. He kept yelling, but his voice faded as the door closed behind him. Simi finally sat down. Her hands were still shaking. Tola sat beside her and held her hand. "You're safe now," she whispered. Simi nodded. "Do you want me to stay the night?" Tola asked. Simi shook her head, tears falling down her face. "No. I think I just need some time to be alone. But thank you for everything." Tola reached out and hugged her tightly. "Call me if you need anything. I'll check in tomorrow morning." Simi nodded, still wiping her eyes. When Tola left, Simi locked the door behind her. Her hands were shaking. She walked slowly to her bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Her shoulders trembled as she cried softly into her hands. A few months later, the courtroom was silent as the judge read out the sentence. "Maurice Adewale," the judge said firmly, "you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in prison for rape, stalking and attempted assault." Simi sat quietly in the front row, holding Tola's hand. Her heart pounded as the guards led Maurice away in handcuffs. It was over. The video she had recorded, along with the photos and the bracelet, had been strong evidence. Her story had been heard. 2 months later, Simi and Eli moved into a new apartment, a smaller, quieter place. She changed jobs and worked fewer hours so she could be home more. Life was calm now. One evening, as they watered plants in their little garden, Eli looked up at her. "Mummy," he said softly, "are you happy now?" Simi smiled gently and nodded. "Yes, my love. I am happy." Simi knelt beside him, pulled him into a hug, and kissed the top of his head. She had survived. And now, she was truly free.